Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It's been a while since we spoke like this, face to face. I hope you guys are all good. I hope you're all having a good start into 2023. In this video, I want to do something a little bit different. It's been now 5 years since I've used micro four thirds cameras and micro four third lenses. I'm very fortunate because I started off as a hobbyist, just doing it for fun. But in the last few years, I've actually been doing this professionally, and I have been maintaining my lifestyle by shooting different projects with micro four thirds gear. So I wanted to kind of look back and reflect on all the different lenses that I've used. This is going to be a personal review of the lenses that I've ever owned. I've bought all of them during the various stages of my career and also when I was a hobbyist with my own money. So this is not sponsored by anybody. This is just my personal thoughts. And what I thought will be quite fun to do, not necessarily to make a tech super in-depth specific review about each piece of gear that I've used, but more like to give you an overview and my feelings, my emotional feelings towards specific gear, because some of the stuff I bought and I really liked it, some of the stuff I bought and I didn't quite like. So in terms of the practical application of how these lenses were, what kind of projects I use them on, I thought it might be interesting for you to hear, and also my sort of like advice, if I could give you any advice in terms of like, if you could only like buy one prime lens, which one would it be? And the sort of interesting lenses that are out there that are worth trying and considering. Now, most of the gear that I'm going to speak about, if you go into my YouTube channel and if you look at the content, I do produce examples of actual, like a live application of a specific lens. So for example, when I was using my Helios 44-2, which is a vintage lens, I have a video out there, which is like a portrait video shoot that I've done, which shows what kind of results you can get with that specific lens. I think it's useful to actually look and assess other people's work that has been done with a specific lens, a specific camera, and see what's possible to achieve, rather than sitting in a studio and like photographing charts and then comparing the sharpness, because I just don't think that's quite practical to the real world, and it's all about the real world and how you apply these things. Anyway, without further ado, now that you know that this has all been like my personal journey and my personal money that I've bought all of this stuff with, of course, I haven't tested every single lens out there, but let's just look into what I have owned and my thoughts about it. Let's get into it. So I would like to begin by actually speaking about the kit lenses that are Panasonic kit lenses, because what I have heard from other photographers, other videographers that use other brands, is that the kit lenses are not very good. And a lot of other people that I've spoken with, they kind of say that like, okay, yeah, so you get a kit lens, but it's not great. So you automatically look into buying a nicer prime or a more professional zoom lens for these other brands. I have to say that my personal thoughts when it comes to Panasonic specifically and Lumix, the kit lenses are good. They are sharp and they are more than adequate. Of course, low light usually is going to be an issue with kit lenses because they are 3.5 to 5.6 aperture. But my favorite kit lenses that I have used, and I still have one of them, is this 12mm to 32mm pancake, because it's very small. You can take it with you anywhere, and it is actually very sharp. But the other one, which has been even more of a surprise, is the 14 to 140 f3.5 to f5.6. That lens is phenomenal. You get such a huge focal range throughout the use of that lens, and it is very sharp. So I remember there's a video, if you look on my channel, I went sailing from Oban, which is a city in Scotland, and we sailed 500 nautical miles to Plymouth in England, and I shot that entire video on the 14 to 140mm. From a documentary point of view, having these kind of different focal lengths that you can zoom in and out from and compose your image differently at various stages is just really cool to have. And so, yeah, the kit lenses for micro four thirds, I definitely wouldn't disregard them and think that they are rubbish, because they're not. I would hang on to them and then look into upgrading and perhaps buying some nicer primes. Which leads me very nicely into the one lens that if I could recommend anyone buy, just to upgrade your kit, if you could just buy just one, I think after all these years, my favorite would be the Olympus 45mm f1.8. I think that lens, the ratio you get between the price and the quality, the output is just really good. And also the focal length, 45 millimeters, is the quickest one to kind of like enhance your photography and videography, because with the bokeh that you get with that sort of compression, and also it's quite sharp, it's just the quickest way to kind of differentiate your work from the other things that you see out there, or from what a kit lens might be able to produce. The focal length is very usable. In full frames, this is 90 millimeters. Very nice for shooting portraits. The human face looks very pleasing to the eye. The bokeh is very creamy with that lens. But also even for some landscape work. Sometimes with a very wide angle lens, when you're shooting a landscape, it's everything is so small on the horizon and you can't really see the detail. You have like a lot of the small detail and everything's quite far away. But having a little bit more compression, having a little bit more of a zoom, you can just see much more detail in the frame, and it's pretty cool. So yeah, and I think in terms of the prices, even if you look at the Olympus 45mm f1.8 new, it is still relatively cheap compared to the other lenses that are out there. So yeah, that would be my one recommendation. The second lens that I think is great for Micro Four Thirds is actually this one. I've got it on my GH5 Mark I here. It's on here like 90% of the time. This is the 20mm f1.7. I've shot a lot of projects with this lens, both from a hobbyist perspective and from client work. It's just a very efficient focal length. You can basically record video, talking head videos. You can record any sort of landscapes and establishing shots. F1.7, great in low light, and it's very sharp. Again, this is not a technical sort of review, but just when I look back at the images that I get from the 20mm f1.7, super sharp lens, very happy with it all the time. The only thing that I would love for Lumix to upgrade if they ever see this video, the only downfall is that the focusing motor in this lens is slow. Now this is the Mark II version of the lens, and despite this being the Mark II, it's still quite slow. In the GH5 and the GH6, you have this cool function which is called focus transition, which basically means that inside the body of the camera, you can set two focusing points, like a close-up and an infinity, for example, and the camera will itself transition from close-up to infinity, vice versa. You can set up to like 3 points, which is like a very quick and easy way to up your production value when you are, coming in and out of focus for different objects. Now you can't do this with the 20mm f1.7. I suspect because the motor is out of date, that function is just grayed out when you use it with the GH5, GH6. It would be great if there was an update to keep the lens the same size, just as small, but with a faster focusing mechanism. I know that the Olympus recently came out with the 20mm f1.4. It's just a lot bigger and a lot more expensive, so I personally wouldn't go for that option. But it would be just nice to see an update. But yeah, that's my second prime lens that I would really recommend. It is very close also to the 25mm f1.7, which is a standard 50mm focal length. That one is pretty good, and the focus mechanism there is quicker. It's the more modern one, and it's cheaper also. So that could also be a feasible option if you want to have the sort of full functionality. Me personally, I just really like the pancake design. I think it looks really cool. And I think the 20mm is just a tad bit sharper than the 25mm f1.7. Again, my personal opinion, but that's just how I feel when I've used both lenses. So I do prefer the pancake, but anyway, it would be good to have an update for it if it ever comes around. Now, I want to talk about two lenses that I've owned that I was a little bit disappointed with and I wouldn't recommend you buy. Most notably, this was the Olympus 12mm f2. Now, although the build quality of that lens is really nice, it's metal, it's got this really nice focusing ring which slides and you can kind of make it so it has hard stops or that it's focused by wire. It feels nice in the hand. It just wasn't sharp at f2. I remember using it for a couple of wider establishing shots and having like a wide shot for an interview that I was once recording. And I just remember, looking back at the images that I got, and it was just a bit subpar. You can just kind of tell, I could just kind of tell that it was just not as sharp as the kind of sharpness that I was used to with other Micro Four Third lenses. So that was a bit disappointing. And also the 12mm f2 is not cheap. It is a bit of a premium price tag that you get with that. So that one I would personally avoid. Similarly, I also didn't really quite like the 14mm f2.5. It's a fun lens to use because it's a very tiny, small little pancake lens, but the focal length is a little bit boring, and it's also a little bit lacking the sharpness. So those two I would personally avoid. Okay, now I want to quickly move on and speak about some of the vintage lenses that are out there for the Micro Four system, and the ones that you should try. My favorite one is actually this Jupiter 50mm f2. Tiny little lens, metal build quality. I like it because it's got this tiny little adapter that you can buy online, that you will have to buy online to adapt it to your system. But it's very small. The adapter is very nice and sturdy. Once it's on there, it feels really good. And the lens itself is very nice to use at f2.8. At f2 it's a bit soft, f2.8 really nice, and you get this cool halation that a lot of people are using, these like diffusion filters, like the black Promise filters and that kind of stuff, to get this halation around the lights. This one kind of does it by itself without the use of any filters. So just a nice addition to have when you are shooting portraits. However, slight different story. There's also the Helios 44-2, which is a 58mm f2. That one is also really great. It's a lot bigger than the Jupiter. At f2, it's also very sharp, so it's very usable. The problem that I have with the Helios is actually not the lens, it's the adapter. And I thought this was only just me, and I thought it was just my copy of the adapter that I had, but I've done some research online and I've seen that this has been a complaint that other people have also had. So the the Helios 44 f2, the adapter is a lot bigger, first of all, but even worse, it's actually not that sturdy when you put it onto the camera body. So when you attach it to the camera body, there is just like a little bit of play that you get, and it's just the quality of the adapters, unfortunately not that great, and it doesn't feel safe. And I'm a little bit OCD when it comes to these things, so I like to make sure that my gear is going to last me a long time. So whenever there's this little bit of play that I feel between the lens and the body, it always makes me feel like dust and other things can get in there. So I usually just use it on a project, shoot whatever I have to shoot with it, and then I kind of quickly swap it out and either close the sensor or put a different lens on there or something, because it just doesn't feel that nice. However, in terms of the image quality that you get out of the Helios, there are different variations of the Helios. I think I actually have the cheapest and the worst one. And even with the cheapest and the worst one, I still feel it looks really nice. Quite pleased with the sorority bokeh, quite pleased with the sharpness. The next three lenses that I want to talk about is going to be the primes that have been manufactured by Sigma. There is the Sigma 16mm f1.4. There's then also the Sigma 30mm f1.4. And finally, the 56mm f1.4. Now, I've only used the 30mm, so I haven't used the other two. However, it's been good in terms of the quality. The focusing ring was very nice and smooth, very like nice and dampened whenever you turn it. f1.4, plenty of light coming in that to the sensor, so yeah, you can shoot on lower ISOs, and it was sharp. It was very sharp and nice at f1.4. The problem is you can feel straight away that this has been a lens designed by Sigma primarily for the APS-C body. So it is bigger, it is heavier, you can like tell the difference straight away. And me, with the sort of work that I do and the lifestyle that I have, I am always traveling around quite a lot and I'm moving around quite a bit. I really do need my system to be as small, as compact as possible. So the Sigma f1.4 lenses, the primes, are just like, I wouldn't buy them again. And even though they are very nice and was very happy with the image quality, I feel that with the primes that are by Olympus or Panasonic at f1.7, they're just as good, they're just as sharp. Of course, there's a small difference in light, how much light you can get into with an f1.4 versus a f1.7, But on the whole, in the practical application of things, more or less, it is the same. And so, yeah, I would personally, looking back, if I had to do this again, I would stick with the primes that are designed by Micro Four Thirds for Micro Four Thirds. That's my conclusion on that little series of lenses. Now, this entire video and my latest obsession has been this Laowa 7.5mm f2, which is what I've shot this video on. My last few projects have been done with the Laowa 7.5mm f2 as well. Really quite happy with this lens. I completely the opposite opinion of the Olympus 12mm f2. This one at f2 is plenty sharp. It is good in low light because relatively low aperture, and also it is tiny. It is small, designed for Micro Four Thirds, does what it's supposed to do. The focusing ring on this lens also feels very nice. It's got hard stops, which is refreshing. And I think I've got the Mark II version here because I don't have aperture control on the lens. I can control it through the camera because there are some connections, but the focus, you still have to focus with the actual ring on the lens. But yeah, the 7.5mm f2 has been a lot more usable than I thought it would be. Previously, when I was buying it, I was a bit skeptical, I was a bit concerned, thinking that a super wide and ultra wide lens can only be used in a narrow application of things, thinking that maybe some establishing shots and that's pretty much it. But when I've used it, I've used it on a documentary that I shot when I did another sailing experience with a different company, where we sailed from Cornwall, which is the south of England, to Galicia, which is the north of Spain. It was a 12-day journey, and I documented this journey using only this Laowa 7.5mm f2, and I was very happy with the image quality. I thought that the images looked brilliant. I could also film inside the cabin of the boat where we were, because at f2 the aperture is just bright enough for you to get enough light in low light scenarios, which is great. And I thought that, yeah, shooting human faces and portraits and, people doing anything might look weird, might look distorted because, it's an ultra wide. But actually, I was just in my head about it. When I actually used it and tried to do portrait work with that lens, it looks really cool. And the distortion isn't as much of a factor as I thought it would be, provided that you frame your subject in the middle of the frame and not somewhere oddly to the sides. If you do that, actually the conversion that you have with all these kind of like leading lines that you sometimes get actually looks really awesome. So definitely have no regrets buying the Laowa 7.5mm f2. If you haven't tried an ultra wide, I would recommend this one. I know that there are some other versions as well. Laowa recently came up with a 6mm, which is even wider. Haven't tried that one, but fairly impressed with the brand. So Laowa, in the future, I will be looking to use more of their lenses. Now, that's pretty much all for personally the lenses that I've ever owned. I do have a sort of wish list in terms of things that I'd like to try, which would be nice to try, but I haven't had my hands on them yet. Particularly, I think macro videography would be pretty cool to try. So I know that people speak highly of the Olympus 60mm f2.8 macro lens. I've never tried that one. I would love to try the new zoom that has come out in recent years, the 10mm to 25mm f1.7 by Panasonic Leica collaboration. There's also the 25 to 50 f1.7 collaboration. Looks really cool. Expensive, so I haven't had the opportunity to work with those lenses yet, but it would be interesting to see how they are in the practical sense. But anyway, my concluding thoughts on Micro Four Thirds. Yeah, keep your kit lenses, look into getting some nice primes, and once you learn how to work with the system and use it to its advantages rather than its disadvantages, you can really get some really cool results. I know that even sort of Panasonic now are pushing their full frame gear, and most people are switching to full frame. I've been shooting Micro Four Thirds now for 5 years, I'm really happy, and I'm going to continue shooting with it. I think eventually time will come when I will upgrade to the GH6. I haven't had a need for it yet, but time will probably come for it. But yeah, that's pretty much been my journey with the system, and yeah, those are my thoughts. I hope you found this video useful. Let's get a discussion going. Let me know in the comments below what lenses you're currently using, what have been your favorite lenses and gear, what you haven't liked that much. Yeah, let's have a bit of a chat down in the comments below. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.